There's a particular weight to a certified letter that makes your stomach drop, like someone just handed you the invoice for your dignity and you didn't even know you ordered it. The mailman Stan looked at me like he'd been asked to deliver bad news before breakfast, and when he said Certified David, I felt my morning tilt. I opened it on my porch, the cedar fence I built behind me still smelling like fresh sawdust, and I realized in one slow, horrible second that somebody had decided my life was their problem. Stan always looks tired, like delivering other people's tiny moral victories is a full-time job, and he didn't meet my eyes. He said the complaint was from city code, but he said it the way people say it was a mistake when they mean someone did this on purpose. Across the street, Linda was sweeping her driveway with the kind of fury usually reserved for arsonists in movies, and the envelope in my hand read in bureaucratic English, "Notice of violation, remediate or remove within 30 days." My fence was 6 feet of cedar. I'd stained myself stained with a can of Stain 12 blisters and a lot of cursing. I'd dug post holes in clay that tried to eat the shovel. I'd negotiated lumber that flirted with bankruptcy, and I'd spent afternoons with a friend who pretended not to notice when I bragged about each perfect plank. To me, it was a thing of pride. To Linda, apparently, it was a war crime against the aesthetic flow of the neighborhood. So I did what any reasonable, non-rivetingly brave man does first when someone declares war. I paced, I drank bad coffee, and I explained the problem to my dog Buster. "It's Cedar Buster," I told him. "It ages like a good whiskey, it gets character." He licked his paw, which I took as legal advice. Then I went to the city clerk's office and read the code like it was scripture, and tucked away in the tedium I found a loophole. Tactile signage for accessibility was allowed without a permit, so long as it didn't stick out like a moon landing. You can see where this is going, right? I'm not proud, but I am decisive when provoked. Linda had called the city, rallied the passive-aggressive troops, and was already drafting victory speeches. I decided to respond in a way that was equal parts legal and well theatrical. I bought 5,000 nails. Not the clean, pretty ones from the big box store, those would have been boring, but rusted, heavy heads from a salvage yard where OSHA nightmares go to nap. I called Sully, the contractor, who smells like sawdust and refuses to file paperwork on principle. He came over with a van that coughed a halo of grease and a grin that said, "This is the part of my job where I get to be petty on someone else's dime." We started hammering at 8 in the morning. If you've never heard rusty iron being driven into fresh cedar at a rhythm that sounds like a construction crew, and a drum line had an argument, imagine a metronome that got angry. Bang, bang. Sully drove the nails one strike to set one to sink, leaving the heads proud just enough to catch the light. We marked spaces with chalk, we checked the code again like conspirators rereading a contract, and we hammered until my forearms felt like 2 used-up cocktails. Linda came out in her robe at 9, phone in hand, and started yelling the kinds of things people yell when they've already lost the argument they're trying to win. "You're ruining the neighborhood," she screeched. "You're destroying property values." I kept hammering. "It's hardware," I said, as if that explained a universal truth. She called the cops. Officer Miller arrived, a decent guy who hates paperwork, and he walked the line between the nails and common sense. He touched one carefully, and with the patience of someone who has seen worse backyard projects said, "It's on your property. It's not a crime." But the nails were doing their work. They clustered into patterns to the untrained eye. It looked like mad dots, like a swarm had decided to stage a sit-in on my fence. To me, it was a message. With the help of a late-night Braille translator and a stubborn streak of spite I couldn't have explained in therapy, I decided the message would read, "Mind your own business." There's an artistry to being petty when you're not trying to be a cartoon villain. It's a balance. So we hammered until the sun climbed high and the neighborhood started to gather like it was opening day at a very small museum. People drove by, took pictures, laughed. Someone whispered it looked like a Mad Max prop. I felt the strange, smug warmth of having done something both ridiculous and perfectly right. Then I mixed a chemistry project that reads like a prop maker's primer, vinegar, hydrogen peroxide salt, a sprayer full of accelerated rusting. At night, when the street hummed with useless light poles and Linda's TV flickered, I misted the nailheads. The next morning, the fence bled orange. It wept rust down the cedar like blood on honey. It looked like a relic from a world where fences had stories. The media arrived within hours. A local reporter with hair that defies reason wanted a soundbite. I gave her a line about inclusivity and tactile experience for the visually impaired, and she nodded like I'd handed her a human interest gift wrapped in controversy. Linda, sensing the narrative slipping, stormed out in a blazer and accused me of everything from vandalism to offending public morals. The cameras ate it up. But the twist, because every good suburban opera needs a twist, came on the day of the hearing. I showed up to the town hall in a suit I'd borrowed from the dress better to win section of my closet, and I had a plan that was half legal argument, half street theater. I argued the literal code tactile signage allowed, hardware allowed. I collected online signatures, printed out articles about industrial design, even read a biography of Louis Braille in the Lou. I was ready to be a righteous nuisance. Then Gary stood up. Gary was not in my original plan. Gary was someone I'd met online, the sort of friend you make when you post something absurd and a stranger finds it deeply amusing. He was blind, wore a t-shirt that proudly announced his indifference to modesty, and he walked up to the podium with the confidence of someone who knows exactly what words like justice feel like. He ran his fingers over the fence work, and to the board's stunned silence, he read the message aloud. Mind your own business. That moment was quieter than any applause. A few chuckles leaked out, a chairman tried not to smile, and Linda's face turned colors in a spectrum I'd never seen on a human before. Gary explained gently that the phrase could be read by anyone as a kind of stern, spiritual advice: focus inward, tend your own path. He said it with enough warmth that it turned the room just a little to my favor. The chairman leaned back and said something nobody expected. The fence, while odd, technically complied. Complaint dismissed. There's a kind of wild relief in winning on a technicality if you think of technicalities as justice. We walked away with a verdict and a weird little badge of honor. The fence stayed. Linda collected her binder, stared daggers that promised 1,000 future petty grievances, and retreated like a general who'd lost a battle but not the war. For a while, the neighborhood talked about nothing else. What I learned, and this is the part you might expect to be sanctimonious, but I'll keep it honest, is that people try to control the view they have of the world because it comforts them. They think their aesthetics are safety, and they mistake conformity for community. Linda wanted the street to be a painting where every brushstroke matched. I wanted my fence to be mine, a loud, messy claim that said, "This is my property, my labor, my life." The nails were part message, part decoration, part insult, and if I'm honest, part art. The moral landed in a quiet moment, not in the hearing room. A week after the ruling, when the internet had moved on to another spectacle, and the news vans had packed up their light rigs, I stood by the fence with a small gold plaque I'd bought, because I like irony with a finish. I screwed it in beside the first Braille cell. It read, "The Hatcher Memorial Wall, dedicated to the pursuit of privacy. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder." Linda came out to get her mail. She kept her head forward, eyes on the pavement, the way people do when they've been beaten at something petty and are too proud to look defeated. She walked inside without sweeping, without commentary, and for the first time in weeks, the street felt like it had exhaled. Was I proud of the rust? Yes. Did I enjoy the spectacle? Guilty as charged? But beneath the jokes and the viral videos and the strange civil victory, there's a quiet, true thing I hope sticks. Boundaries matter. Not just property lines, emotional boundaries, privacy, the right to shape the little patch of life you control without being micromanaged by someone who has nothing better to do. I stood up for the literal cedar I'd stained with my own hands, and in standing up for wood, I learned to stand up for space, to be imperfect. So here's the part where I turn it over to you, because this isn't a victory lap I want to take alone. Have you ever had a neighbor who tried to manage your life like they had the remote? Did you comply, or did you find your own strange, small way to fight back? Tell me the scene. What would you have done with the certified letter in your hand? And if you've ever turned something petty into a lesson, share that too. I want to hear the good, the dumb, and the gloriously ridiculous.